What's your worst date story? I went on a dinner date with a guy who made me pay for his ex-girlfriend's meal. Yes, you read that correctly. I was 22 and had matched with this guy David on a dating app. He seemed normal parent, good job in marketing, shared my love of hiking, great sense of humor over text. We'd been chatting for 2 weeks before he asked me out to dinner at a nice Italian restaurant downtown. I spent hours getting ready, chose my favorite dress, and was genuinely excited. David had suggested this upscale place, so I assumed he was planning to make a good impression. I arrived right on time and found David already seated at a table. As I approached, I noticed there was a third place setting, but figured maybe they just made a mistake. A gorgeous brunette was sitting across from David, and they were deep in conversation. My first thought was that I'd interrupted something, or maybe I was at the wrong table. David looked Sarah, perfect timing. This is Jessica, my ex-girlfriend. Jessica, this is Sarah. They stood there in complete confusion while Jessica gave me a once-over and a fake smile. David gestured to the empty chair between them like this was totally normal to ask. David explained, as if it was the most reasonable thing in the world, that Jessica had been having a really tough time since their breakup 6 months ago. She'd been struggling financially and emotionally, and he felt bad for her. When he mentioned our date, she'd gotten upset about him moving on, so he invited her to good for her to see that I am dating again, and for you two to meet since you'll probably be seeing each other around. Wanted to make sure David was dating someone nice. I hope you understand, we were together for 3, shocked that I just sat down trying to process what was happening. The dinner got progressively worse. Jessica ordered the most expensive items on the menu, an appetizer, entrepreneur, dessert, multiple cocktails. She spent the entire time talking about her and David's relationship, their shared memories, and how hard the breakup had been for her. David kept nodding sympathetically and patting her hand while I sat there like a third wheel on my own date. When the check came, David looked at me. You invited yourself into this situation by agrees. When it clicked. This wasn't a date. This wasn't a date. This was a setup to get me to help pay for his ex-girlfriend's expensive meal. I stood up, pulled out enough cash to cover only my own order, which was just a salad since I'd lost my appetite, and placed. This is the most bizarre and disrespectful thing I've ever experienced. Jessica, I hope you figure out your situation. But using someone else's date to David started protesting that I was being dramatic and that he was just trying to help Jessica transition into them being friends. I walked out while hours later, David texted me asking if I wanted to reschedule our date for just the 2 of us and that he was sorry if dinner. I blocked his number immediately. A week later, a mutual friend told me that David had pulled similar stunts with 2 other women from dating apps. Perturnally, Jessica was in on it, and they'd been using this scheme to get free meals. While audacity still amazes me, some people really think they can manipulate others into funding their weird relationship drama. Now, I always suggest coffee for first dates. Much harder to scam someone out of a $5 Lodi.